And the fire pit's in the middle of the court. Literally, right in the middle of the court. All right, if anybody actually gets cold, I can turn your fan down. I'm leaving mine right where it is. I was like, I thought it was cool this morning. I got over here and I'm like, I had to go home and change. I was hot. Is this autumnal summer? Yeah. No, it hasn't been bad. It hasn't been bad. Yeah, I would agree with that. Right. Yeah, I went once. Not all of it. I only did. I think I got. I think I did one, maybe two cannonballs. Chris, you were there. I think two. Yeah, I was teaching the kids how to do it, working on their technique. So yeah, and then we went to the beach once. So, and that actually wasn't bad. We went to Horseneck Beach. It wasn't hot, but it was comfortable. So yeah, it's good. All right, so that's my mic and the fan not cooperating. So we'll have to live with the air noise. No. If I need to turn it down, Chris, just tell me and I will turn down the fan. Oh, the things I do for audio quality. I just slowed it down a little bit, so hopefully that'll help. Just because I'm standing pretty much directly under it. All right, Genesis 42 this morning, since we don't like to start on time, ever. Yeah. Well, yeah, we had certain other people who just didn't leave. So Genesis 42. So we picked up last week, or we left off last week, Genesis 41. There was a small famine going on, if you recall. Anybody remember that? Small famine? Yeah. How widespread was the famine? Worldwide, best we know, right. That's what the text says. So we'll go with it. So then we pick up in chapter 42. Now, chapter 42, it gets a bit funky, and I'll be honest and tell you I don't understand all of what is going to transpire, or at least the mindset. And that's going to be true this week. It's going to be equally true next week. Next week, we're covering 2 chapters. We should probably start earlier, but closer to on time, maybe. So I don't understand completely the mindset that is here. Understanding that we're dealing with Joseph. Now, how old is Joseph as we hit chapter 42? Do you remember how old we said he was, approximately? Joseph. So let's review real quickly. How old was Joseph when he was sold into slavery? 17. How old was he when he stood before Potiphar, or before Pharaoh, rather? 30. He was 30. So he had spent 13 years being a slave and a prisoner because his brothers, loving that they were, sold him into slavery. So 13 years he was a slave and a prisoner. For how long was there seasons of bounty in Egypt? 7 years. So Joseph becomes 37, right, at the end of this season of bounty. And so as we hit chapter 42, he's at least 37, probably 39. We're going to give a couple years of, in Egypt, they opened up the grain houses after everybody had run out of their own. Presumably, they'd heeded the warning and saved up a little bit. You think in most agrarian cultures, 1 year of famine, you can pretty much ride. If you plan it well, especially if you've had a good crop the season before. Second year of famine, you probably are running out of gas. And so probably Joseph is about 39, but definitely at least 37. How old was he when he sold into slavery? 17. Steve missed that part. So it's at least 20 years ago. It's at least 20 years ago, as many as 22 years ago in that window. So Joseph's been in Egypt for a very long time. He was more time in Egypt than in Israel, so he's far more Egyptian than he is Jewish at this point. He has been for 9 years living as the prime minister of Egypt, eating the fat of the land, wearing high Egyptian fashion, culture, all those things. Was over at the Museum of Fine Arts this week. They have the Magna Carta there on display. It's one of the earliest copies. It still dates from from the mid 16th century, whenever it is. Which it's really cool because you get in, you pay all this, you go through the whole thing, and the Magna Carta is a piece of paper, but it's a very important piece of paper. And so interesting to see. But while we were there, we went ahead and walked through the Egyptian section because that's Kate and I love the Egyptian section, and I'm really looking forward to the series that we're doing this fall because it's all Egypt, all quarter long, just about in church. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then at the end, December, I believe the 12th is the date, though the date could be a bit off. Exodus, Gods and Kings comes out in theaters, and that's starring Christian Bale as Moses. So Batman plays Moses. And it's funky because if you watch the previews, and this has nothing to do with anything, but if you watch the previews, everybody else is running around in white and gold, and Moses is running around in black. I'm like, could you have been any more obvious that Batman is being Moses? So it's just kind of funny. So anyway, but when we were there, we saw, the Egyptian fashion, and, the guys walked around in guy liner and a ponytail and a wraparound skirt, kind of it. And maybe a necklace, but shirts were kind of optional, and so his style's different. But Joseph, looked Egyptian. He spoke Egyptian. He'd been there for 22 years, and then we run into chapter 42. We get the events of his actual reunion with his brothers. So we'll pick it up in 42, verse 1. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" Okay, how many brothers did Joseph have? He had 11, right. So somebody stayed home. So, right. So we'll find out who as we go on. But it's just an important catch. He had 11 brothers. 10 of them went to Egypt.
Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin, his brother, who said, "Lest some calamity befall him."
Now, how long ago had Joseph died, insofar as Jacob knows? 22 years ago, right? Right, same time that his brothers sold him into slavery, Jacob thought he died. And Jacob said, "I'm going to go down to my grave in mourning." That was his intent. 22 years later, he's not sending Benjamin to Egypt. Why? Unless some calamity befall. He's living up to that ideal of mourning for the rest of his life. I mean, he still has not gotten over Joseph. Benjamin, if you think about it, Jacob had how many wives and concubines combined? 4. 2 wives, 2 concubines. Joseph was the son of whom? Rebekah, Jacob's favorite wife. Firstborn of the favorite wife made him favorite son, though he had 10 older brothers. Benjamin had who for a mother? Rebekah also. Rebekah died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. Benjamin was the last son of Rebekah. She only had 2. And so here is Jacob, 22 years later, after Joseph died, still kind of pampering Benjamin. Now, how old was Benjamin at this point? Best we know, Benjamin was like 2 years younger than Joseph. So you're dealing with a 40-year-old dude. He's not like a kid. He's coming up, he's 37, 39, so yeah, he's about 37, give or take. Not exactly a baby. Not even a teenager, not even kinda, and yet he's sending his older sons, who are now pushing their 60s, some of them, and he's not sending Benjamin lest something bad happened to him. Crazy. So this is Jacob. He's not the sanest person on the planet. Yeah. In that area. Yeah, so I mean, he's young by relative standards, and that's true of the Israelites in that era. Abraham lived to 185. Jacob lived, well, he's still alive. Isaac lived to I want to say 174, but I'm guessing in that area. Jacob only went to about 140, so it's still kind of shortening. I don't know that the life expectancy in Egypt was quite as much. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us, and secular records are all over the planet. So yeah, not a young guy, but not an old guy, but certainly not somebody that you would think he should be babying, and yet he was. Verse 5. I don't know where we are. Oh, and always me. And the sons of Israel went down to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And so what we see here is there's a whole train of people going down. It's not just Jacob's family; it's everybody in the region. There's a main highway that Hebron was not far from. It goes down along the Mediterranean, heads west over to the Nile River Delta, and then drops down into Egypt. And so everybody in that region is traveling to Egypt. Everybody knows where the food is, and it's a long drive to the grocery store, but we know where it is, and so they're all going.
Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who told to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth.
Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food."
So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him.
All right, so we have this going on, this dynamic. He recognizes them, but he is so Egyptian, and he was young. Let's face it, 17 to 40, you change a bit. But he was so Egyptian that they don't recognize him. I mean, he's speaking to them through a translator. Not that he does, and we'll find this as we go on. He understands everything that they're saying, but he's speaking to them through a translator. He is acting like an Egyptian governor, which is what he was.
When Joseph remembered the dreams which he had about them, he said to them, "You are spies who have come to see the nations of the land."
Okay, is that like an odd juxtaposition of phrases to you? He remembered the dreams he had when he was a lad. What was the dream? His brothers would bow down to him. And, whoa, look at this. My brothers are bowing down to me. That's happened. And his response was not, hey, my dream came true. It was, you are spies, and you have come to seek out the nakedness of the land. He said, look, that harshness, that coarseness that he was treating them with continued. That's an odd juxtaposition of phrases in what he's thinking and what he's doing. And so what we see in that is that his actions are not impulsive, they are considered. He's not acting, the way he's treating to them is not the way he's thinking about them. And we're going to see this continue on, that he knows they're his brothers. And we know as we continue on, there is no grudge. And yet what he is doing and how he is acting and how he is treating them is not, hot-headed temper, I'm going to get back at you. There's a method to the madness. And this is the part I haven't figured out yet, is what the method really is. We could debate it, and he doesn't tell us, and so that we don't really ever get to know. But understand that what he's doing is intentional. It's not reactionary. So just see that as we go. And they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food."
We are all like being sons, we are honest men, your servants and spies.
Okay, so they're pushing the definition of honesty here.
But he said to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land."
And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. In fact, the youngest is with your father today, and one is no more.
Interesting choice of words. One is with our father, and one is no more.
Joseph said to them, "Who is it who spoke to you, saying, 'God honest'?"
In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here.
Send one of you and let him bring his brother
Interesting reaction. Wouldn't you agree? Just this insistent, you're spies. I also like the phrasing, by the life of Pharaoh. I mean, this is Egyptian. This is, as God is my witness. By the life of Pharaoh. Pharaoh was a god in Egypt. And so this is, that kind of a thing. And so his desire is for them to bring Benjamin. Now, given what we can kind of surmise about the family dynamic in Jacob's family, who's about the only person Joseph was likely close to in his family? Benjamin, his brother. So, for 15 years, they were close, they were brothers, and he's like, this is how you're going to be tested. And the story, we get part of it here as we get into the, further on and we see how the story plays out. There was more conversation, either that or the brothers start, they were either volunteering information here or there's conversation not present. They relate more of it as we go. But it's clear that Joseph wants to see his brother. How do you think Jacob's going to react to that? Yeah, not going to be a big fan of this idea, is he? I mean, we can gather this sense already. I'm not going to send him unless some calamity befall him. This is exactly what he was afraid of, is what's brewing here.
Wasn't Benjamin the one who tried to help him?
No, that was, who was that? Reuben, right. It was Reuben. It was Reuben who, and he comes back into play into this. It's just interesting how these things cycle through in this story. And it's also interesting how guilt works in this story. But for now, they leave it at the other one is not. They have no idea what happened to Joseph. Last they knew, he was alive, but he's not part of the family. He's just kind of ceased to exist insofar as they were concerned or knew. Interesting phrase. It's very, very diplomatic phrase. One is not. I'm not telling you he's dead. I can't tell you he was alive. I'm not going to tell you we sold him into slavery. We don't know.
Then Joseph said to them, do this and live, for I fear God.
If you are honest men, let one of your brothers behind to your prison house, and you go and carry Jacob to me from your houses.
And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so.
Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw you with Pharaoh. When he pleaded with us, and we did not hear, therefore this was traced.
All right, so here's guys, 20-odd years later, going, we should have known this was going to come back to haunt us. We're guilty, and now we're paying. It's interesting how guilt works, isn't it?
Reuben answered them, saying, Did I not speak to you, saying, Do not sin against this boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us.
Okay, so Reuben, look, I told you guys, bad idea. Still advocating for Joseph.
But they did not know that Joseph understood them, who spoke to them in interpreter.
And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So Joseph is not unmoved by this conversation. He knows what's going on. He hears what's going on. It's breaking his heart. That's why I said there is action that he's taken and there's emotion that he's experiencing, and they're not connected. He's got a plan that has nothing to do with what he's feeling. And so he's doing that. And so, he goes, he cries, he fixes his guy liner, he comes back, and then he talks to them some more, and he binds Simeon. Now, what role did Simeon play in history, in history going up to this? Do you remember? It was one of the chapters we said, read this, we didn't teach it. Simeon had led, and we'll just recapture, but do you remember what Jacob's daughter's name was? Anybody? Dinah. His daughter's name was Dinah. So there came a point where one of the Canaanite princes fell in love with Dinah, dragged her off, probably defiled her, decided he wanted to marry her, and came to Jacob through his father, the king, and said, "Hey, I'd like to, marry your daughter." And so, Jacob confers with his sons, and they say, "Well, look, here's the, Simeon and Levi, like, tell the men of the village that yeah, we'll become one with them. They just have to be circumcised." And so Jacob gives this message to the guys. He said, "Look, you can have our daughter. We'll intermarry. We'll become one, but you're going to have to be circumcised." And so the prince was so in love, or in lust, take your pick, that he actually had all the men of the city get circumcised. 3 days in, they can't move for obvious reasons. Simeon and Levi go in and they kill everybody. This is Simeon leading this parade. And so here's Joseph in a position as governor. It's interesting that he picked Simeon. That's about the only reason that I can think of from their history. There was no prominent role that he necessarily played in selling Joseph to slavery, but he did lead that charge. And so here he is. He binds Levi and keeps him, or Simeon rather, and keeps him in jail. Just interesting tidbit from, as we have gone. It's 10 of, so I'm not going to finish this. So let me recap real quickly, and then you can read the rest of this chapter at home because we've got to pick up 43 next week. So basically, Joseph puts Levi in prison, sends the rest of the brothers on their way, puts the money for their grain into the grain bags. The money they give him, he put it back. Freaked them out when they found that out, because now they're like, "Oh, great. We got grain. We didn't pay for it. They're going to accuse us of being spies and thieves." Wonderful. Exactly what happens, too. So they go off, and they tell Jacob. Jacob literally hit the ceiling. He's like, "You did what? You said what? They want what? No." And that's kind of where 42 ends up, is like, it just ain't going to happen. Benjamin's not going anywhere. 43 then picks up, getting ready to go down the second time. But we don't really have time to go there. So this is kind of part 1 and 2. These 3 chapters go together, but we can't obviously get through anything, so let alone 3 chapters. Any questions, comments, real quick?
Funny how God has a plan, and it's nothing to do with ours.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, the ways of the Lord are not our ways.
Planned out, and we mess it up all the way, and it comes out with Joseph loving his brothers and
Yeah.